One of my favorite things about playing and following games in early development like Radical Heights is what I like to call brainstorming or wish listing. It's a very indulgent act in which I sit down, sometimes with a group of friends, sometimes by myself, and just think about gameplay mechanics that I might like to see as that game makes its way through development. Now, I do like to take some serious consideration when I make a list like this. I like to ask myself if the mechanics I'm considering make sense. I like to consider both the positive and negative implementations of those mechanics into the experience if it's already playable, like Radical Heights. And I like to ask myself if it fits with the current vision the game seems to have already developed and created for itself. You know, is this something that makes sense for Radical Heights as a greater experience? Once I've done all of that, I just start having fun because that's what this is about. It's not about being super constructive and like down to the wire because I'm not a game dev, so I can't get on that level and say that could never work or that could totally work or that doesn't make sense for a game. I can just speak on the perspective of a player, someone who has put in, 50 plus hours and say, that would be fun to me. That would add to the experience to me. How could that potentially improve something else that already exists in the game? So that's the perspective we're going to come from. And again, it's all in the name of fun. I don't expect any of these things to end up in Radical Heights, and I don't expect any of them to fit with Boss Key's vision for the future of the game. But let's go ahead and hit up number 1 of 3 on my list and talk about shoulder swapping. So right now in the game, when you swap shoulders, your camera moves from the right side to the left side and nothing else happens. Your character is still firing right-handed shooting, even though you're looking over the left shoulder. It's a third-person shooter, and honestly, as great as it is that the game does let us swap shoulders when a lot of other games right now aren't in the third-person genre, I'd love to see the game just further embrace the fact that it is the third-person shooter and actually allow us to swap from right-hand shooting to left-hand shooting entirely when we swap shoulders. A lot of this game is played very aggressively and very fast. You don't get really far in this game by holding down a corner for 15 minutes trying to shoot someone. It's not PUBG. Someone will eventually push you. But in those instances where maybe you're low on HP and you're trying to peek to stay alive, I like the idea of you being able to peek a right-hand corner as tight as you can peek a left-hand corner. So being able to do both of those things equally, being able to expose a minimal amount of your body and still pull the trigger and get shots off on someone who is aggressing you. Make that person work. Make them find a better route than just rushing you head on and rolling because they know you're low on HP. I think it would give us a little bit more strength, again, in holding those corners. And it would ask the advancing player, again, to work a little bit harder, a little bit smarter to make that push, to ask themselves, how do I want to rush this? How do I want to roll? What cover should I use? Should I break out the trampoline? So on and so forth. To me, it's just, again, going all in on the third-person aspect of the game and saying, if we're doing third-person, let's go all the way. Let's let people actually swap from right-hand shooting to left-hand shooting. Plus, a lot of games just don't do that, and I think it looks great. And I think, it does have pretty powerful gameplay potential. Moving on, and this one is going to sound a bit funny to those of you who know Boss Key and know, of course, the background of their studio's founder. Some sort of a manual reload mechanic, some sort of an active reload mechanic, if you will. And I'm not just saying this because Cliff Bleszinski happens to own Boss Key. In fact, he's not even the main project lead on this game. That's Zach Lowerly. I'm saying this because manual reloads and active reloads make reloading fun. They take something that we do in shooters without ever really thinking about it. Well, we think a little bit about it, but it's really not that exciting, and they make it far more exciting. And they often tie those systems, like they did in Gears of War, to something that benefits gameplay for that player. And when I thought about the active reload the other day while I was playing the game, I thought about the adrenaline system, and I thought to myself, that could be like a match made in heaven. So the adrenaline system in Radical Heights right now works like this. You consume a Royale with cheese, you kick in a door, you jump through a window, you take damage, you gain adrenaline. The more adrenaline you have, the more opportunities you have to actually gain the benefits of it. The benefits being increased movement speed and tighter recoil patterns. So essentially you increase your accuracy when firing in full auto. Adrenaline is a huge part of the Radical Heights experience. So why not bring in a manual reload mechanic that allows us to execute a perfect timed reload that will sustain our adrenaline while in gunfights? So it wouldn't actually give us or boost our adrenaline bar landing an active or manual reload perfectly, but it would allow us to sustain it. Essentially, it would slow down the rate of decay for our adrenaline. So if I eat a bunch of cheeseburgers and then I get into a gunfight and I keep landing perfect active reloads, that bar is going to drain a lot slower, which means I get to hold on to my adrenaline longer while I'm in that gunfight, and gain the benefits of it for a longer period of time. That just sounds really wicked cool to me. I like the idea of that. Now, I think it would be important for there to be some sort of limitation on it, like players can't just reload one bullet and get the benefits of an active reload. They would have to reload a percentage of the magazine, or perhaps they have to do a full reload. They can't do a quick or tactical reload. They have to have an empty mag in order for the active reload to actually activate. So you could always do a manual reload and potentially jam your weapon, but in order to get an actual active boost, to get that adrenaline sustainability boost, you'd have to have an empty magazine, which would then proc the active reload, and then you could land it, and boom, now you sustained your adrenaline, you slowed the rate of decay, now you've got more adrenaline in the gunfight when you need it without having to consume more burgers. I personally just really like the idea of this, and I know I'm a little bit obsessed with manual and active reload mechanics, and I just want other games to use them, so I completely understand if this makes no sense to anyone else, and if everyone else thinks it's the worst idea ever, that's okay. I'm probably just a bit crazy about this sort of thing. Let's move on and talk about probably the only thing on my list that really feels like it does actually make sense for the game, and that is the idea of more BMX ramps, or actual BMX ramps outside of like the skate parks and the BMX racetrack located throughout the city. So just small kicker ramps that would allow the player to gain an elevation advantage, whether it be launching out of the top of a Burger Commando or one of the laundromats or something like that. We already have the trampoline. The trampoline, and of course no fall damage, creates some really interesting scenarios. Rex jumping and rocket jumping as well is great. You know, it really pushes the verticality of the game and lets us do really crazy fun things. So when we get down into the flatland of the Radical Heights Dome, and we're dealing with, you know, the more urban environments, having little kicker ramps, like maybe one that lets you launch onto or over the Burger Commando, or one that lets you launch onto this rooftop or the gas station or the arcade, I think would be a great addition to give players sort of an additional tool, if you will, when they're riding the BMX bike. So if I roll into town, I see 3 guys with the Burger Commando, and I say, man, let's, you know, make a push at that, get involved in that gunfight. Maybe I hit the kicker ramp and I end up on the rooftop, and then I use that just like I would the trampoline as an advantage to get that high ground, to get the high ground, if you will, and then find a way to engage the targets down below. Plus, who doesn't want to jump off of more stuff with the BMX bike and like do a 360 over the Burger Commando and then bail off and quickscope some guy who was camping on the roof of it? That sounds amazing to me. Like, count me in 150% there. I had a few more, but these are the 3 that I got really excited about and that made the most sense to me in terms of actually boosting the gameplay experience, so I'll go ahead and leave it at that. I'd love to hear your own personal wish list. When you do make these lists, if you've already made one or if you're about to make one, really think about what I said. You know, try and develop some sort of an understanding for how that mechanic might positively or negatively affect the experience. You know, for instance, maybe they don't want players to have any way to sustain adrenaline in fight. It should be all about the risk reward of actually having to eat a burger, rather than the really more basic risk reward of failing or succeeding a reload. Now, of course, if you have the jamming mechanic in there, that does bring a little bit more risk reward into a manual reload, but probably not as much of actually like unequipping your weapon and having to eat burgers. So again, try and look at both sides of the coin. Ask yourself if it kind of fits with the vibe of the game already. What effects can it have on gameplay, positive or negative? And please, please, share your thoughts down in the comment section below. I love discussions like this, just all in the name of fun, all in the name of, hey, there's a bunch of us who like this game, so let's just kind of, you know, spit our 2 cents on what we think would be cool for the future of it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a killer Friday, a great weekend. If you happen to get rad, maybe send me some clips over on Twitter of you getting rad in Radical Heights. This game is absurdly fun to watch. Hit me up at TonyMo Gaming with any insane Radical Heights clips you have. BMX bike, trampoline, trick shot, whatever nonsense you might be pulling off. I'd love to see it over the weekend. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I will see you in the next one.
You have been brought here for a purpose, the most important task of your lives.